Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Sorry I'm coming to you a little bit late. I've been on the road traveling all day today and just got checked into the hotel here. And as I was thinking on my drive around today, I was, knowing that tomorrow is the solstice. Many of you will be watching this on June 21st, the solstice. Just got me thinking a lot about the time of year. Normally at this point, we would like to have our crop up and going across much of the United States, of course, and soybeans really going close to flowering. And it just got me thinking about the image you're looking at here, which is the latest data we've got from our satellite MODIS, which is on EOS Terra, looking down and creating an NDVI image. So I've changed the color bar over here to where the cooler colors represent very low NDVI values and the bright colors represent very high. And a couple of things start to stand out to me. For example, this whole region in through here where we have low NDVI values, also down here in parts of the mid-Mississippi River Valley. And just thinking about this, I know having driven a lot of this area over the last week or so, a lot of the canopy just hasn't closed yet. So therefore, the satellite's still seeing dirt, and as a result, it's getting a much lower NDVI value. But there was something else about this image that kind of caught my attention today, and it was because of a tweet sent out by the University of Wisconsin-Madison about Nebraska. Back on June the 7th, there was some really nasty storms that went through the midsection of the country. And if we zoom in here and look at the NDVI imagery, you can start to see these areas where there are sections of very low values. And they kind of streak across the image like this one right over here in parts of Iowa. I was there on the night that these streaks were actually made. It was due to a severe weather outbreak, and it's just amazing to see the effect of this. If you go back and look at the hail data, those were the storms and the maximum estimated hail size. So what we're actually seeing here in some of this NDVI imagery, is the damage crop in this area. So we're going to continue to keep a close eye on this imagery as we progress through the season, just to see how the crop is continuing to develop. But again, some of the reason why this looks so low in this area is primarily due to how late it was planted. Now, a lot of that late plant was simply because of how cool it was back in the months of April and May. I just want to show you again the climate district ranks on average temperature. Now, since we have gotten out of May, we really saw a change in the position of the jet stream. And since then, this is what our June, so June 1st through June 20th, temperature ranks have looked like. It's primarily been the Pacific Northwest that's hung on to its cold bias, and that's been mostly due to deeper troughs of low pressure that just continue to sit off the coast. But multiple waves of heat moving through the midsection of the country. This has caused a very rapid recovery in the GDUs, but we're still, given some regions that are in drought, these GDUs weren't used, I think, to their maximum. I have good news for those in the Pacific Northwest. We continue to see model trends suggesting a decent warm-up. We're going to talk about that in a few moments. But I think the biggest thing we saw in the month of June was just a complete breakdown of the jet stream pattern. So this is what we were talking about in May, and now we can see the full effect of it here. No longer is it just one long extended branch targeting, the Pacific Northwest, but it is broken up quite substantially with deep troughs hugging the coasts, one here, and then that large ridge today, which sent very hot conditions into the upper Midwest, where we had heat advisories, heat warnings, and heat watches in this area. I was looking at one of my favorite websites. If you ever want to go to this, check it out. It's called coolweather.com. That's COOLWX.com/record. And when you get here, you can choose the time and location. But if I just look at the last 24 hours of temperature records, the blues represent where we approached or tied or set a cold low, and the warmer colors are where we approached a record high. So it just kind of gives us an indication of the pattern. And again, you can see the troughs along the coast, see them there and here, versus the ridge in the midsection of the United States. Now that same amplified jet stream pattern has also given us this. We have a low that's moved out of parts of Montana up into the Canadian prairie, where it's going to slowly move its way over toward the east. We're going to see a lot of Canadian storm track here in the coming days. This has brought rain to that very critically dry area right in through here. We saw it in the drought monitor last week, the Golden Triangle region, which desperately needed some precipitation. Under the ridge, bone dry in places here, but we saw the resurgence of the southwest monsoon. We definitely want to get that thing going, up and going and continuing here, given the drought situation across the Intermountain West and the Southwest. But what you're seeing right now is a pattern that I think we're going to see repeating itself over the next 6 to 8 weeks. And that's one of the main cases I'd like to make in this particular video. So again, last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation. On satellite, just this evening, let me show you. Let's go back to where the sun was up here. A couple of things I was watching. Digging into that trough, look at how strong the north to south flow is in the winds in these upper level cirrus clouds. I mean, it's just screaming into that trough. We did see some convection popping here on the sea breeze down along the Gulf Coast, but it's this deep low that pulled out of parts of Montana and is going through the upper Midwest as we speak into the Canadian prairie that has initiated a lot of severe weather here. A lot of haze in the sky out ahead of this, and we can see some wildfires in parts of New Mexico on the backside of this as well. Now, some of these storms, like I said, put down quite a bit of severe weather. They're still doing it now as I'm recording this about 10 o'clock in the evening here on Monday. But up to that point, we've had 150 additional reports of severe storms this year. So some pretty large hail and a lot of wind damage plus one tornado report. Okay, we've now seen, I kind of gotten up to speed to this point. What I want to discuss next is where's the pattern going and is it still going in the direction we had thought? Right? So we noticed compared to April and May, the jet stream is broken up. We've lost momentum. We talked about that on Thursday. So what we want to know is, does this continue? And what I want to watch most carefully is kind of the Gulf of Alaska to the Pacific Northwest. I think that is where this pattern is really becoming established. So as we play this forward, we're looking again at jet stream level winds. I'm going to take you all the way out here to how about Thursday into this Friday and into the weekend. You see, once again, we tend to favor more ridging in the midsection of the country here. This is all to Saturday the 25th. And what I'm not seeing, and I think this is most important, is I'm not seeing any indications going all the way out. Let's just stop here at the end of the month. I'm not seeing any indications of split flow in the jet stream in the Gulf of Alaska. Now, if it were to split here with one piece going north, another piece going south, that would send all the heat and drought conditions really rapidly developing across the west. Instead, the jet stream is kind of continuing to dip here, and even it's showing up in the ensemble members, and so therefore it kind of rises up again in the Midwest and then runs out here to where there's some split flow where this high pressure cell is out in the Atlantic. So that pattern is still there. Okay, it's still in place. We're going to see fluctuations in it. That's normal. Okay, just to see a wave of heat coming in followed by a cool off, a wave of heat followed by a cool off. What ends up happening in that pattern, though, is when those cool-offs come in and there's better chances at rain, not everybody gets it. And that's where we start to see the regional drought developing. So as you think about where this pattern's going over the next 10 to 15 days, the next graphic I want to show you is from the 12Z ECMWF. And it continues to highlight the very active southwest monsoon. And the only way to get this going so early is to keep the jet stream north and probably ridging here, which means Canadian storm track. And whenever there's a Canadian storm track, what we end up getting is these weak fronts that kind of slide through something like this as the lows go across. And what they're met with is flow around the upper level system here. There's an upper level ridge that then pushes some of that moisture into those boundaries. And the net effect of that is to initiate storms and almost a ring of fire configuration, which means we watch this whole area for thunderstorm development, all the way up to the Canadian prairie as well. So that's kind of the setup for the next 15 days. So what I'm starting to get very concerned about is actually to the south. I'm talking down here in the mid-south from the western sides of Kentucky and Tennessee all the way over to Texas. This is an area that could be tucked too tightly under that ridge that could continue to see some drought development. We've already noticed that over the last 2 weeks, there are several places in here that have missed out on some of the recent storms. Take note of how dry it is in Texas. In pockets throughout the plains and the high plains, there's a region in Minnesota and surrounding areas that's missed out on some rain as well, even though storms are kind of coming through there right now. And there's some some spotty areas, I should say, over here in the mid-Atlantic through the Carolinas that have also missed out too. But I'm just very concerned about this part of the Mid-South going forward. Now, where we also need to be paying attention is the temperatures, because over the next 5 days, we're still continuing to see the above average heat, but we're going to get that break. So you notice here that the heat really just goes and stays pretty far to the south by day 5 through 10 as some cooler air comes in. I'm going to show you how that all happens in just a few seconds. But you'll see it start to fade and rebuild again once we get out there to the beginning of July. I still find myself pointing the finger at the ocean temperatures and the atmospheric wind pattern that is giving us this ocean temperature response. What I'm talking about is the very warm water here I'm talking about the cooler water just off the coast of, the Pacific Northwest. We still have the cooler water coming off of the Baja of California, and our La Nina is still very present. And what we've discussed many times this spring and now into early summer is how much this particular ocean temperature pattern favors more troughing of low pressure here with a ridging under the warmth here, okay? And therefore another ridge that forms in this area. That seems to be the way that this ocean temperature pattern historically correlates to the jet stream. And our La Nina is still quite strong. If you just look at the next 15 days, remember how we do this. This is today all the way through July the 5th. This region in through here represents our strong easterly trade winds, which is a telltale sign of a La Nina. And they're still going in this area. In fact, the Southern Oscillation Index, we've been talking a lot about that. It's started to make a recovery as well. It bounced off a value about 14, and it's now back up here above 16, telling me that this is still well above the criteria, which is a value of 7 to be considered La Nina. There's another part to it as well, the MJO. Now, the MJO, when there's a La Nina, tends to favor the Western Pacific. So it tends to like to sit in phases, 6, 7, 8, and 1. And when it's there, that tends to give us more troughs of low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska. It tends to give us a less strong or a more retracted Pacific jet stream. And so with the MJO currently sitting here, see how weakly it's going to go through the null phase? I wouldn't be surprised if it pops back out where we expect it to be in early summer over here, continuing to rob momentum from the jet stream. So what I'm trying to do is take all of these different kind of moving pieces in the atmosphere, take account of where things are, and then assess whether or not I think the longer range models have this right. So this is another update. It just came out this afternoon on Monday here from the ECMWF, looking at the month of July in terms of precipitation anomalies. And I'll be honest, it's not much different than the same maps I showed you last Thursday for the month of July. The area that I think I'm going to watch, watch most carefully is going to be here in the MidSouth, from Texas to Southern Plains over to the MidSouth. It appears that this pattern will give us more of those ridge riding storms that are going to come through this area. And I think there's also going to be enhanced convergence along the East Coast given the position of the Bermuda High, which will sit here. I think we'll actually see more precipitation coming through the Canadian Prairie than the model's letting on as well. I think that will be the preferred storm track with this particular setup. So those would be the adjustments that I would make overall to the model. But going from the precipitation anomalies to the temperature, this is how things are shaping up, and that's very similar to the update we provided on Thursday. Most regions across the country seeing above average temperatures. Okay, so the setup, the near, the long term, if we get into some of the details, let's start up with the severe weather map. Now, this is late in the evening on Monday when I'm recording this, so I was still watching these storms go through here. But the frontal boundary that will be associated with the low that's going to go to the Canadian Prairie and then eventually here in Ontario and east, it is going to just drape on Tuesday right in through this area, parts of southern Wisconsin over to Kansas. And then on Wednesday, it'll be a little bit farther to the east. The Storm Prediction Center is just not highlighting, given the strength of that front, okay? It's just not highlighting a large area of risk. I'd like to show it to you, though, by going to the high-res 18Z NAM. We're going to start this at 10 o'clock tonight. So these are the storms that we've been watching all day, moving through parts of the Dakotas and Minnesota. The front is connected down here with the southwest monsoon, and the deeper upper-level low is still spinning over Montana. So as we play the overnight hours tonight on Monday night into Tuesday morning, Tuesday midday, why don't we halt it right there in the afternoon? So the low has moved through Manitoba into Ontario, scattered showers and storms on the backside, and a cool down. I'll show you that in a second. But that main frontal boundary just sits right in through here and kind of links up with the southwest monsoon. So that's what I meant by those weaker fronts. So what we end up getting out of that is the possibility of some stronger storms tomorrow night right here, while the East Coast still deals with showers, digging into that deeper trough that's over the east. So out to Wednesday, going into Wednesday morning, afternoon, and heading toward evening here, that's when the front continues its advancement to the south. So we're going to watch from the mid-Atlantic right here through Kentucky, Tennessee, and linking itself back up to the southwest monsoon. So it's kind of coming up and over, and it's connected into a low here. That's the setup in terms of the lifting mechanisms in the atmosphere. Now, to show you where this all goes after that, I want to take you straight to the upper levels again. starting us off with 500 millibar heights. There's the trough in the west, the trough in the east, and the big ridge in the middle part of the country. As we play this forward through Tuesday out into Wednesday, do you see where the next few troughs go? They kind of come in and stay here through the Canadian provinces. And the ridge becomes established from Texas, really from New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, right up here to southern Illinois by the time we get into Thursday. But my attention's really being drawn to what's going on between Alaska and the Gulf of Alaska, because the pattern is setting up with a bit of a high over low. Now, I would worry about this getting blocked, but it doesn't appear that it's going to be blocked. And when I say blocked, it means stuck in one place for at least 10 days. That's technically what a block is. But this one's not. What it ends up doing, though, is by the 27th, that's next Monday, it shifts farther east, but the size of this ridge and the low that's south of it is enhancing the depth of the downstream trough. And this is that shot at some cooler weather that's coming in. But notice, the ridge, still here, 591 decameter ridge, is still sitting stretched somewhere across the south and mid-south. And as we go past this is now getting out into week 2 and going all the way out there. Let's just stop this on July 1st or maybe July 2nd. I continue to see the presence of the ridge here. The flow comes in, turns around, and then dives into this trough over New England. So there's not much overall in terms of a pattern change for me to call out and say, no, July is going to look entirely different from what the models are saying. So what they are individually saying is this. Let's shrink that up so you can see it. There we go. GFS on the left, European on the right. As we play it forward, we've already talked about the first low. I think the Europeans got a better resolve on this. And as we go through Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, and evening, that's where that frontal boundary is going to sit right in through here. All right. Now, as we play this on forward through Thursday, getting out here toward Friday, we're going to see our next system kind of curling its way up into the Canadian Prairie. And this one's just going to run just like the other ones did throughout the Canadian Prairie. So what we end up getting out of that is kind of scattered showers. And these maps aren't that really kind of giving us the bigger picture, but the lows will be here. The weak fronts come sliding through, and that's going to initiate this ring of fire setup. It isn't technically in both models quite well. So that gets us through Friday and then into the weekend. So you see how the next low goes through and leaves its front there. We also have a tropical system that we're going to be keeping an eye on too in the East Pacific. But that's pretty much your next week, looking out there. It's kind of the same story. By the time we do get out to next Monday, that last front will be cutting through the East Coast. And that's going to deliver better chances of rain here. It is pretty well resolved in both models. And just to make a note here, I kind of skimmed over, but I would like to point out that tucked away in that deeper trough toward the end of this week, there is a deeper upper level low here just off the coast too that could increase the chances for rain in parts of New England, maybe down to the mid-Atlantic. So you see, that's a lot of subtle features, and that's why these two models miss out on it because of the resolution and the timing here. But if we just kind of stitched it all together, this is the European model precipitation anomalies for the next 7 days. So there's your Canadian storm track, all right? There's your deeper trough over the east and the cutoff low that we're going to see by the end of the weekend. Here is the monsoon pushing right up against each of the weak fronts that comes through. But you back this off and you see there's a lot of places missing the precipitation. And even getting into week 2, when we saw that kind of stacked high over low kind of push its way in, this is what the precip pattern looks like. So what's going to happen is that there will be places that miss this moisture, and I'm going to have to watch them very carefully over the next couple of weeks to see who is going to be vulnerable going into the first full week of July. Temperature-wise, we saw these highs already today on Monday. As we play forward into Tuesday and then Wednesday, a couple things to take note of. The cooler conditions here from the monsoon. The heat moves east with the ridge, but notice how we start to build triple digits back into the Central Valley of California. Going out to Thursday, into Friday, and Saturday, that's our next round of heat that comes in the midsection of the country. Again, this is all jet stream dynamics that are helping this out. And we're going to stay here in the triple digits late this week and weekend in the Central Valley of California. But you also notice better heat in the Pacific Northwest the first time in a while. And just to show you this one more time, our sliding 5-day windows suggest that by the time we get toward the end of this week, through the weekend, and into early next week, while some cooler air comes in here, that blocked high over low setup, that blocked up, it's not officially blocked, but that high over low setup starts to bring in a weak ridge into the northwest and finally some above average temperatures. But how long do they last? I go out there to the day 10 through 15 time period. We start to lose it, and I think we go back over into a repeat of what we saw. I have to agree with what the Climate Prediction Center is saying, okay? As we look out there through the week of June 28th through July the 4th, I agree that these are areas I'll have to watch very carefully for rapid onset of drought. They're tucked under the ridge. And in terms of temperatures, you can see that that's also an area that could possibly see quite a lot of very warm temperatures, that in the west where the heat is finally returning. So as we finish this month of June or move toward the end of the month of June, I think the critical things to watch are in the Gulf of Alaska and in the Mid-South. Those are the two main setup points, I think, for the pattern going forward. But I'll keep an eye on them, and I'll report back to you again on Thursday. Thanks for letting me get this to you late tonight, and we'll talk to you all then. Thanks.